This young generation have been speaking about going to the streets for a while. My son, he actually went to the streets, but the way they conducted themselves, this one I heard from him, was different. In fact, when somebody tried to throw stones, they would say, no, this particular movement, we are not throwing stones. Yeah, as a church, we are very, very reactive. The thing blows up, then we come and we give statements after the whole thing has occurred.
So there are people in church who have never met Christ. They inherited the church. They do not know about salvation. And that's where we have a disconnect.
Welcome once again to Shared Moments with Justus. And today we're going to have a conversation that I think is timely. So, without saying a lot of things, help me welcome on set. First of all, my friend Sitati. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that you could find time to be part of this conversation. We'll come back to you. Let me also bring on set Professor Achia. Good to have you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, viewers. We want to welcome you to this program. My name is Peter Sitati. My nickname is Pastor. Let me say that for a reason. Sometimes it becomes uncomfortable for other people when you are not ordained. They don't feel comfortable you being called pastor. So for that reason, let it remain as my nickname. Now, further to that, maybe I've been a preacher for some time now. I'm not a young man. I'm a father of Gen Zs. I have big children. I think one of them even went to the streets. So they are big enough. They are no longer even children. I think we have neighbors.
Yeah, the neighbors.
Actual neighbors.
True.
I've been a police officer for a long time before I started preaching. Oh, no, let me say that I started preaching when I was a policeman. I worked in the CID for over 10 years. Then at some point I decided it's enough. So I joined the private sector because I thought maybe I'll die poor. Because to me, I was thinking I was not getting enough money and I don't want to be corrupt. So that's why I decided, no, let me venture elsewhere. And, sometimes also, during those days when we were younger, education was not really appreciated by many senior policemen. So when you go to university, they feel uncomfortable because it looks like you're going to replace them.
You're not one of them.
Unaongea kizungu mingi. So they didn't appreciate it much. So then I work in the private sector. I'm actually a forensic scientist. I do forensic investigation. Presently, I do fraud forensic investigation. Other than that, I have a group called Bible Research Center. This is a group that targets church leaders. For a long time, I used to preach in spiritual campaigns, otherwise known as crusades. And we end up baptizing backsliders in church and watoto ya maelders kinayoachia watoto hao wale wamefiatuka. So they come here for us to baptize them. So we waste a lot of money baptizing people already in church. So I thought about it. Then we started a group with Professor Philip Rono called Bible Research Center. And so far we have baptized over 100 pastors and bishops from. We have converted 11 full churches so far. Spread around the whole country. We have classes almost everywhere.
From your introduction, I already have 1,001 questions as a follow-up.
I'm a good friend.
Yes, Prof.
My name is Thomas Achia. I'm a father of two men and one boy. One is 26, a real Gen Z, faithful to the cause. And then I have a 20-year-old, and then the retirement plan was 12.
Okay, not a bad one.
Yeah. And I'm a mathematician by training. I am University of Nairobi trained, BSc, MSc, PhD, Nairobi. There's a way we view ourselves.
Titles matter.
Yeah, they do. Yes, I'm trained at University of Nairobi. I I work for the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention as a statistician. But I've been privileged to be a professor at Strathmore, University of Witwatersrand, and KwaZulu-Natal. So those are aside.
He's talking about South Africa. South Africa.
Yeah. So the Lord has been gracious to me and given me opportunities to teach at universities across Africa. But I ran something called an organization called the Nairobi Advent Ensemble Foundation, and we ran a program called 1,000 Voices for Kenya, and 1,000 Voices for Peace within the same program. And we've been doing 1,000 Voices for Turkana. So that entity always looks at issues that happen in Kenya, and we attempt to voice something concerning them. Yeah, and for me, it stemmed from South Africa. I left Kenya for South Africa after the post-election violence in 2007. Yeah, when I realized that this isn't working, so I went elsewhere.
What was not working?
The violence, it was amazing. We'd lived together so harmoniously for so many years, and suddenly the political elite pitted us against each other. So I moved out and said, I can't live here, let me go for greener pastures. But when you leave home, is when you realize the value of home. Yeah. So when I came back, I set up that organization, 1,000 Voices for Peace, to give back to Kenyan society.
I think 2007 we were headed the Rwanda.
The Rwanda way. Yeah.
I was a policeman then, so I know exactly what happened.
In 2007.
Yes, I was still a cop at that time. So to me, I think what you're doing is tremendous. We pray that God gives you wisdom to continue doing this.
Yeah. It's something really amazing. For me, we did, that was 2007?
Yes.
And then we've had subsequent. So we do it every electioneering period, so that we continue speaking to the conscience of society about the need for a cohesive society.
In 2007, since we are making reference to that, during that chaos, in your position then, as a cop, going through issues that emotionally as a human being you're also part of. So how do you manage to...
Because you definitely also have your own political persuasions.
And remain an effective policeman. Now, the truth is this. All policemen are politically affiliated to some divide. If you go to those police lines, so to speak, we call them police lines, but actually it's actually police quarters where they live. They also have arguments of who they think should be the president or the MP. They also have arguments. The difference is maybe you work in a far-flung area. You do not work home, so definitely maybe you support a presidential candidate, because and that presidential candidate also informs the person that will choose on the ground as the MP and the MC, etc. But they also have these arguments. But having said that, I also wish to say this. Policemen are just human beings. They are people's children. So being a policeman does not really change you unless you are just a bad person. Psychologically also, there are so many policemen, maybe, who have grown up with psychoanalytic issues. So socially, this guy is dysfunctional. So this is a person who will do anything to get attention, because he never maybe gotten attention at home when he was young. So what do you think this guy will do when he gets a gun and he has power? Because that gun comes with a lot of power. So, and when you are being picked to be a policeman at the centers or wherever it is, nobody looks at your mental capability. Presently, I'm not sure about what happens, because I'm no longer a policeman. But during our days, the trainers were hard on us. You went there and there was a paradigm shift even in the thought processes. Your cognitive abilities and you are changed completely. The kind of language that he uses to teach you. Ni matusi tupu, and then you get used to it. It becomes fun. So once it becomes fun, then even the English that you learned in school disappears. Anza kuambia watu mutu hii. So, you come up a totally different person. And then you kind of believe that maybe people should know that you are a cop.
Yeah.
And then if you start thinking about it like that, then it's already a problem.
I'll come back to you later on because we'll need that experience, especially when we'll be handling the things that we saw on our streets not so many days ago, and the interaction between the civilians and our men in uniform.
Sure.
But let me bring in Prof. Chia on this, and specifically, you mentioned that you have your neighbors who are 20 and 26.
Yes,
You
yes.
are
Those guys with whom we are fighting over land.
Exactly. And as we were, preparing for this conversation, we even shared that one of them called you during the protests that we experienced in the country, in Kenya, a few days ago.
Right.
And he was calling you not to ask for anything, but to inform you that he was on the streets, part of the army, of the Gen Zs that were demonstrating, risking everything there is to risk.
Yes. Yeah. I think it caught me by surprise. My son has developed some political sense over the last couple of years that I never knew had grown to that level and to that extent, because he's in employment and he could not sit in the office. He actually took leave to go and become part of this thing that was happening. He did not want to be left out of a national discourse. And so him, and not just himself, a group of his peers actually took leave from work to participate in something that he thought was important. And for me, that amazed me. It impressed me. Yes, but it also worried me knowing the kind of reaction we've seen in the past from the police force. Yeah, but I felt really proud that this generation, my son, did not want to be left out of this conversation, especially because in the previous elections, many persons in that age bracket did not bother to vote. So something must have happened that has driven some consciousness. And I think it's also basically because that generation, his peers, even himself, having completed university, you come hopeful that society will give you a good job, you'll drive a car, you will move out of your dad's house. He actually is my neighbor, he's still in my house. So these opportunities are not there for them. So I think the perceived societal lack of taking care of their needs really drove my son to be part of this discourse. Yeah.
And you say that that's one of the things that really made you proud. Why so, especially given that you were also scared at the same time for his safety?
The fact that, this young man who is part of a national discourse. We often fear we have our children with the PlayStations in the house. And then somebody actually said that the people went to the streets were iPhone wielding, KFC eating, and he actually Uber riding youngsters. So for me to find my son, he's actually earning a salary he never imagined he would earn. He's sort of feeling like society has left him out. And so the consciousness to me was important. I, as a parent, am facing difficult economic times. Yeah. And it is a feeling that I didn't know that the young generation were also sharing. Yeah. So his going to the streets impressed me that we are having a generation of people who care about this country. Yeah. And it was not political. He didn't go there because it was Baba. In the past, it was Baba who called these guys to come out. And it was usually the less educated who went out. But these are kids who are educated, who have jobs, but they're concerned about this society.
And the funny bit is, for the longest time, like you say, this is a generation that we have, has been tagged as entitled.
That's the point. And that's where where I'm concerned. I was really surprised. Because to me, I didn't think that they even, like Professor said, I didn't even think they could care. Because to me, I thought as long as they eat, as long as they are good, I didn't know that they see our suffering. And I feel, Professor, on this, that one of the things is that at least we have children who can take matters in their hands. Because all along we have been thinking they can't do nothing. Yeah. But we didn't know that these guys can actually take control of some things and do them without even support and supervision. So them having taken that step was really bold, given their age and times they have lived in. It was really bold. And you know, they have been at home doing other things that most of our parents wouldn't think they will come up to be anything. Yeah. Because with us, we were actually child laborers because our fathers and our parents used us as cheap
fathers
labor.
were fathers.
That was cheap labor under tyranny.
And just for context, perhaps if you're watching this conversation and you're wondering what it is that this particular generation, the Gen Zs, have done that suddenly the old folks are proud of them, is that there have been an uprising here in Kenya, and it has been fueled perhaps by many things, but lately we have had the government pushing for reforms, both economically, financially, that then would help the government raise more money to perhaps run the government. And this has brought in a lot of discomfort, given that people feel like it's too much from on the people, where you want them to be the ones to really raise so much and yet receive so little as a benefit.
I think one of the things we've never sat and thought about is Kibaki took over government that had 8 provinces. Sure. And then when Uhuru comes in, he comes in and he has 47 counties. Most of these counties unable to generate any revenue. And then the incumbent president comes in and he gives us a lot of hope that he would do something differently. But he comes in and, in my opinion, he finds that there was something the previous president was facing that he wasn't really aware of, that he did not take cognizance of. So our economy as a nation, we need a national dialogue to figure out whether we can really handle these 47 counties. Because what is coming out right now is that we are unable to sustain this. But the problem is government was coming up with a financial bill that was not well discussed, that the citizenry did not buy into. Sure. And without Gen Z, we would never have had a way of expressing ourselves, because the political class has the muscle and the clout. They passed this thing in parliament without listening to our voices. So for me, there's a lot of discussion that needs to be done beyond the president saying that I have pushed this thing back to parliament. The nation must have dialogue. And I think we need the Gen Zs involved in that dialogue.
And it's unfortunate, Prof, that we are only getting to that space where we are appreciating the role that these young people have played in, leveling the playing field, that it has taken lives for us to be here talking about this, that we have lost a number of young people in these protests for us to actually be now on the table to speak about the real issues.
One of the things about society is somebody says that the only thing that is constant is change. And what we are going through here is really nothing new. If you look at this Kenyan experiment, this bringing together of 43 tribes together, we started it in 1963. The political elite came in with a multi-party democracy, but within 2 or 3 years, we moved backwards and had a single-party system. And then for 15 years or so, under President Kenyatta, we had a single-party rule where the political elite really aggrandized wealth to themselves at the expense of the populace. Then President Moi comes in and is like a passing cloud. Then he realizes in 1982 that I need to really solidify my base. And for 1982, by the time I get to university in 1990, I need to say this.
1990.
By the time we get to university in 1990,
You're a fossil, my brother.
in 1990, when I joined the university, Moi is solidified a system around himself that is protecting him. I was in university, and if you spoke what we are speaking today, you would disappear mysteriously. I'm speaking from experience. So there's something about our political class, unchecked. They will always go a certain direction that is selfish and against the populace. And so there comes the Orengos and the Railas and the young Turks of the early 90s. And we have a revolution that leads to a very hopeful society in 2002. And Kenyans were literally arresting corrupt policemen
Telling you.
on the streets because we are hoping that now we are restoring sanity and getting rid of the political class. But they regrouped, and we have 2007. And, you know, like, come Uhuru Kenyatta, they have regrouped again, and we are back to 1990. And this is a consequence of the political class forgetting that they are leading people who want to prosper as well, who want to go to school and have education, get Medicare in our hospitals. So these are things that they've forgotten about, and we needed. It was just bound to happen. Yeah.
We also have a problem even in our church, And now the problem we are facing is that we are even choosing politicians in church as opposed to choosing men of God.
Right.
Remember one time Moses was told to go choose, 12 men, one from every tribe, to go and investigate Jericho.
Yeah.
What report did they come up with? Only 2 guys were faithful.
What a good report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the rest came up with, they spread fear.
Yeah.
Then later in the book of Joshua chapter 2, from verse 1, Joshua now sends 2 spies. And they come with a good report. Why is he sending 2 spies? Because he has a record of whatever happened there before. So he chooses men of faith.
Yeah. And you see, this particular generation that has reminded us of the need to actually operate at that level where the tribe is not the factor, you know, where you come from or what you have, economic status does not necessarily dictate what you should qualify for as a citizen. You know, it has neutralized the space, so to speak. But your generation is the one that has been accused of setting, you know, those kind of standards that take us back there.
There are things that are maybe before Professor comes in. If I meet somebody in this country, my generation going up, the question will be, what is your name? Yeah. Somebody tells you, my name is Peter.
What's your second name? What is your name?
Because it is the other name that is important. It's not that the other name is the surname is important. No, they want to trace. They want to know which tribe you come from. So we are tribalistic from a very young age, and we are actually told to hate some other tribes. When I was young, I was told I cannot support Gor Mahia. Whether nini ifanyike, no, you cannot support Gor Mahia. Then when I grew up, I learned that even some of my Kikuyu friends could not eat fish. My daughters have friends that from different places, across all the tribes, and they speak to me. Hey, sasa Makenas, I'm wondering. They have somebody called Makenas.
You know?
They have friends all over. So to me, they are trying to tell me, boss.
Okay.
You are behind the papers.
But I'm just wondering, I don't know what has happened. In the previous elections in 2012, it is these Gen Zs who ran very ethnic discussions. I don't know whether you're forgetting, but 2 years ago, if you went on any forum, I would be so worried about the kind of young people. I didn't know. My assumption was that they had broken the barriers. But during that electioneering period, the social media posts were frightening. And it was so fueled by our political elite. They fueled it and utilized it to their own good. But I think sometimes I'm trying to say that our generation was no different. When I went to university, I must mention in 1990, I came from Mombasa to Nairobi.
We are sorry.
What the political elite did then, the late Nyayo, we had Kuria University Students Organization. He had Rongo University Students Organization. So we had all this, and so they were very tribally designed, so that we would go to Nyayo at his office as a group, and he would give us money. And he used it to his own good. So that is how the political elite developed this system to work for them. And so for me, 2 years ago, I got worried. But I think sometimes you need societal problems to kill some of these divisions that existed. And I think this was an opportunity, and we are riding an opportunity that if we do not take advantage of as a society, we will just slide back.
And people have had an issue with the church in general in burying its head in the sand, especially when population is going through issues, real issues, that perhaps if we only paid attention, we could actually be of great help. And solve and prevent things from escalating to certain levels.
So the sentiments that come from this program are personal.
Right.
But
they're informed.
I'm not forgetting that I belong to the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Right.
And I think I have influence on to certain levels. In James chapter 2 from verse 14, James brings a practical approach to evangelism. And he says, if somebody is hungry, are you going to tell them, nimekuombea, enda salama ukalale usingizi? No, you give them food. So that brings me to whatever happened recently. We have had a backlash from the Gen Zs saying one of the Adventist churches did not open the gate when they needed a place to seek refuge. I want to tell everybody who is listening to this, this was not the SDA church doing this. It was an individual in the SDA church. I also want to say this, that amongst us, not all of us are proper Christians. Some of us are half-baked. Some of us have actually inherited the church from their parents.
Having a form of godliness.
A form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. So some of us grew up we were born in church, so we have inherited the church, but we have never met Christ personally. So we have never had an experience with Christ himself. I'm alive to the fact that some of these activities happen very fast and things change very fast. So somebody may be in that compound not knowing that at some point this thing will come this far. Because it's not very near from town. It's some distance from town. So nobody could anticipate that. Secondly, this person may not have been may not have been trained on some things, because if it is somebody like me, I will know that if I open this gate for this person, is it possible that tomorrow I can welcome them for service? We think differently. But every Christian must ensure that they use every opportunity to evangelize. Hata uwezi ukiwakuta mwashike mweke chini muonyeshe bunduki. You don't need to kill them. You can actually convert them in the process, because now they are under submission. Now, maybe having said that, I also wish to say this, that the church may not have gotten involved a lot in this. They may not have spoken. The church is not supposed to get involved in politics. No, it's not supposed to. The church is supposed to be independent of politics completely.
I agree with you to the extent that there have to be some form of independence in terms of where the church sits and where the politics of the nation or the countries happen. And yet we are still, obligated as a church, as believers, to be the salt of the world. So, Prof, as you come in, perhaps, how do you strike the balance to make sure that, because as salt, you have to find your
You have to
way
be part
in
of the
the,
food.
in the food for you
cannot eat
to.
salt.
You cannot be salt
You can't
independent
eat
of the food
Yeah.
and still be of value,
Right.
to the consumer or to the person.
Salt cannot meet food in the stomach.
Salt cannot meet food in the
There
stomach.
was meat in the pot. I'm looking at the 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9, where the Bible says that you are a royal priesthood,
Sure.
a chosen generation, a holy people, God's chosen generation. We often as Christians don't finish that passage of scripture. We are so focused on being peculiar, being different, being royal. But that verse says, so that you may show forth the praises.
Wonderful.
So the reason why you are unique and peculiar is for purposes of showing forth praises. We as a people focus on things like, and I saw another angel flying in the midst of the heavens, having the everlasting gospel to preach to them that dwell upon the face of the earth, saying, fear God and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come. So we focus so much on being different, forgetting that the reason why God called his church, even in the Old Testament, the reason why he set apart Israel was so that the people could see how unique and how beautiful the religion of the Israelites was. Then they would follow. And any person who noticed and joined, God welcomed to the flock. So as a group of believers, we are different, and we are. But with a purpose. But then we are also the salt of the earth. And the salt must be part of the food. Not too much, not too little, just correct amounts of salt so that that meal is palatable. And that's the same thing we must think about as a community. I know when you look at, say, Leviticus 10:10, it says the Lord detests the mingling of common and holy things. We are holy, we must not partake of the common. And that's where our challenge lies. Because when you look at the political ways of doing things, in Kenya, for example, you must employ thuggery. You can't do Kenyan politics without thuggery. You must have thugs to be involved in politics. You must be dubious in your ways,
so to speak,
to do Kenyan politics. So they think. But then I strongly believe that we must be part of the discourse, but not do it the way that the world does it. We must show a different case of how politics can be done in this country. And I have examples. I have Daniel. Daniel was a prime minister in Babylon. The 3 Hebrew boys, they were actually leaders in that particular community. So we can be part so that we bring about a difference and not do what the rest are doing. We cannot stand aside as a people. We must participate, but as Christians.
Young people, even within our churches, were part of the movement that was out there on the streets agitating for their rights and to be heard. And that voice, somehow, we've had other voices that have tried to, suppressing it, so to speak, so that, you guys, you should tone down on this. This is not church-like.
As a church, we are very, very reactive. The thing blows up, then we come and we give statements after the whole thing has occurred. Yet some of these things we knew something was coming. This young generation have been speaking about going to the streets for a while. So we had a bit of time to have been able to message appropriately in advance. That we did not do, even in the post-election violence era. There was no messaging that would help the people sort of think about how best to handle this. And then secondly, I'm looking at my son. My son actually, I hope he's not listening, but I know he actually went to the streets. But the way they conducted themselves, this one I heard from him, was different. In fact, when somebody tried to throw stones, they would say, no, this particular movement, we are not throwing stones. This he told me. He told me that according to them, they were part of this discourse, but the manner in which they conducted themselves in this was different. Yeah. And so for me, I agree with that. We need to be part of the discourse, but find a way of showing them that this is the way and not the way everybody else is doing it. Yeah.
I want to build up on what Professor has said. We must be a voice of reason. We must also say, this is not going right. The fact that we keep quiet until everything ende also plays against us. A good example. Just 2 days ago, a young man calls me and tells me, whilst they were in town carrying placards etc., one of them was injured. Yeah. And when they tried to run, I don't know the name of the street, near Jamia Mosque. Somebody in Jamia Mosque, in the compound, called them in. And this young man was attended to in the mosque. And he told me, I'm going to be a Muslim. Evil.
Wow.
Then he, of course, talked about what happened in New Life, told me, New Life, simulifunga mlango. Lakini hawa wametusaidia. So, Christianity is defined by people differently. People know that a church should help. Yeah. People know that a church should speak up. So, if we are speaking up, then we should also speak up in a manner that is also helpful. Right. Sio tu tusimame tuanze kusema we don't want to be popular. No. But we want to speak up at a point where it is very necessary, and whatever we are saying should also be something that will help people. So maybe the silence that we're experiencing, we do not know. Yeah. We do not know about, I'm speaking from a personal point of view. I do not know why some people are silent. If I was in that position, maybe I could have done something.
There is, I just want to speak about fear. Yeah. Somebody said fear is like an acronym. He said it is false evidence appearing real. Within the church structures, there's a lot of fear. And I was speaking to some of my fellow members of my church today, and I told them that the district pastor fears to speak out because he fears that the office might discipline him for speaking out of turn. The elders of the church fear to speak out because the pastor may discipline them for speaking out of turn. The membership of the church fears to speak out because they fear the elders and the pastorate may discipline them for expressing themselves. And that fear keeps us from responding. Because in my opinion, the role of the church is to see a need and respond. Sure. Yeah, that's what makes Christianity. The story of the Samaritan. Yeah, the Good Samaritan. Sure. The priest passed by, he ignored what he saw. There was a Pharisee who passed by. But then the Good Samaritan, the Muslim, opened his doors because he saw a need and he did not fear. Sure. By the way, I hear the priest feared to be unclean. He actually feared to be unclean. And that's one of the problems we face as a church. Sure. So we need to address this fear so that our youths, our young men can be proactive in the face of need in society. And that is true Christianity. Taking care of the widows and the orphans, the sick and the lame. And these people need to be our priority.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just on the same point, just before you proceed, that fear in itself can be counterproductive to us. Yeah. Because these young men are watching. According to them, we are not doing the right thing. Right. So what will hinder them from leaving the church? So tomorrow we need to hand over this mantle to somebody. Right. Who are we going to hand over to? Somebody who is already disgruntled. So we also need to ensure that as a church, we do the right thing so that these people can help. Right. So that they can also see that, the church is doing something. This is what Christianity is all about. They also have a lot of information and data from elsewhere. Yeah. They compare. Yeah. They compare. And to them, they see, our church is not measuring up. Yeah. So if that is the case, then how do we then come up with something to form an equilibrium? Is it possible also, maybe, Elder, that maybe we elect the wrong people in positions of power?
I'm very suspicious. So
By that you mean within the church structure?
Yes, within the church structure. Maybe we also elect cowards, people who cannot make decisions, people who do not even read.
I agree with you. By the way, this is my opinion. The church has become a club. A club that somebody says babysits the Christians. And there's some of the babysitters at the top. They don't want you disturbing that comfort zone. Christianity will disturb your comfort zone.
True.
Yeah, the minute you realize there's a need, you will be running. There are the sick in hospitals. There is this. But then we are babysitting the flock through Pathfinder Club. So they come to church, you babysit them on Sunday so that the children don't have something, they have something to do in church. The choir, we babysit the members. But then if we had leadership, and I think there is a need for us to interrogate the leadership of the church today, to move us back from this club into a movement. When this church was a movement, we saw needs and we went there and we did something about it. But what happened this week? The unresponsiveness, we need to question who is in leadership.
What, in your opinion, would have been perhaps some of the most practical ways of responding in this kind of situation?
Maybe before we go there, just to bado roho yangu ijapo.
Fungua roho.
It's something I'm thinking about. There was a guy who told me a story. They were in the village on a lima na ng'ombe. Just so I know you were born in town. You may not know some of these things. I hope now you know
You'll
the
be
difference
surprised.
between a sheep and a goat.
You'll be surprised.
And now we have oxen, and there is that kajembe behind the oxen. I don't know the plow or something. Yeah, the plow. So one of them anatandika ng'ombe, the other one is behind plowing. So this guy mwenye anatandika ng'ombe tells the other one, there was a time you were UT. UT is an acronym for an untrained teacher.
Like me.
Why don't you go to Bugema?
Yes.
And become a pastor? Because now what are you doing at home? And then the guy buys the idea. They go to church. They talk to the church members. Yeah. And they contribute money, and the guy lands in Bugema.
Right.
Calling ni ana? Ni ile mtu ya kuchapa ng'ombe.
It's not the Holy Spirit.
It's not the Holy Spirit. Now this guy comes out of Bugema. Yeah. He has no calling. But it is just that he didn't have employment. Right. Then he becomes a pastor. And because he has no calling, he's a politician.
Correct. Yeah. Because you must protect your position. Yes. Yeah.
Now this guy, because he's good at politics and it's not a calling, right, he's elected to office. Right. And many pastors want to be elected to the office. Right. Now he becomes a senior pastor in the office. Mm-hmm. What do you think will happen later if we have such leadership? Which I think, I'm not sure if I'm right, but I think there are very many of that ilk. So if we have such people in office, then those who are under them, who have a calling, are a suffering lot.
The fear seems to be, disappearing, at least from this younger generation. Yeah. Your generation might still be, struggling to come out of it, but I'm seeing a situation where what happened out there on the streets will find its way
in church
and cause a discomfort that will disrupt.
I'm very sure of that.
My worry is you cannot contain a heated thing in a container for too long. It will always find a way of leaving. And so as a church, we need to be cognizant of the fact that we are dealing with a Gen Z that have access to a lot of information. They are not ignorant. They have been trained to question facts and interrogate those facts. So you will no longer push dogma down their throats and they accept it. They will question it. I have, I think a 12-year-old is currently a Gen Z. He will always ask me, Daddy, you've told me to do it, and I have not agreed. And so those in leadership within this church must rise to that occasion and not use position to suppress the ability of these young people to express themselves. They are not the leaders of tomorrow. These are the leaders of today. Yeah, I was talking, I think just as we spoke earlier, and I told you that when was Kenya at its best? And we spoke of Tom Mboya.
Yeah.
Tom Mboya was 30, 31, 32, and he airlifted thousands of people to go and study in the US. Jaramogi Oginga was in his 30s when he was really at his best. And I think this just shows us this week that as a church, let us give these young people an opportunity to lead. Yeah, and that's what Paul actually says. He tells Timothy that let no man despise your youth because of the amount of energy, drive, passion that the young people have.
There are two extremes when it comes to the church and how it's involved in the welfare of its people at least within this country, Kenya. So we have those who have nothing to say, nothing to do. They enjoy their space. And on the other hand, we have those who are all in.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot these days. During campaign time, we have so many politicians
invited
to church. And that's the time when we panga our arambes so that we can...
it coincides with...
and the problem is, if you refuse to invite this politician to come to your pulpit, you have a problem with some of the members already. Right. Some of the elders in church who are in support of that politician will have a problem with the pastor.
Yeah.
The pastor will be doing something, the pastor will be doing what is right. But what is right is subject to, to definition, because people look at it differently. Right. The society wants something that is convenient to them. Yeah. You cannot give us what you think is right, even if it's lawful. And that has crept in the church. So a pastor wants to invite a politician to give money, or he wants just to be in good books of the politician, or he wants to be known by the politician so that tomorrow he gets something out of them. So then those competing interests then will start becoming a problem. And then there are people in church who, if you bring a politician in church, they will never listen to your sermon again. So every time you preach, he switches off. So where does that take us? So the pastor is in a precarious position. It's I don't want to blame them. I also want to blame the fact that we also have elders wenye hawajai kutana na Yesu. Yani Yesu wanaendanga hivi, Yesu anaenda hivi. Hawajai onana. So he was elected in office because he's educated, like Professor said.
Don't point.
Oh, sorry. Sisemi wewe, lakini maybe the guy is a professor, the guy is endowed financially, the guy has influence, so eloquent, yes, and that happens a lot. Or he always gives a lot of money during fundraisers to help the church, so they want to draw him closer. And you know what the Bible says, that he who desires the office of a bishop desires a good work. Right. He must be. Now those things nobody wants to follow. No. That syllabus is independent of whatever we do in church. Yeah. And that's where we now get it wrong. At the end of the day, now we have all these problems in church because we started from the wrong foot. Ni kama kuanza kumachi unaanza na mguu ya right, kiganjo utakuju. Sasa utakuwa utaenda against kila mtu. Kila mtu anaanza na left, inajulikana Kenya mzima. Huwezi hata uende NYS uende wapi inaanza na mguu ya left. So ukianza na right ni shida. So that is where we went wrong. I also blame the church members. As much as they point fingers at the pastors, etc. But they are also the same people who elect these people in office. Just like we elect people in office politically in Kenya, and then we start crying later.
Our political class are a real representation of who we are. And I was actually, I mentioned this earlier, that we may curse Zakayo or whoever is in that office, but many of us placed in the same position would do similar things, if not worse.
True.
Yeah, so as a society, and I think this is where the role of the church should be, we need to start grooming men of integrity. Yeah, so this integrity question is lacking within the church. Many of, in church today, if you came in driving a machine, by the way, the other day I was speaking to a friend of mine, I told him, how is he had bought a Range Rover Sports. So I asked him, how is your machine? He told me, this is not a machine, this is a chariot. So in our church today, I'm sure he's going to listen, forgive me. He told me, it's not a machine, this is a chariot. The minute you walk in because you're driving your chariot, you qualify to be an elder. And many of the guys who qualify as elders on the basis of resources, education, are not necessarily very close to Christ. And the writer to the remnant says Christ's methods and Christ's methods alone are what are sufficient to lead this church where it should be. But this person is not connected. And so it's a consequence of some of the things you see happening in the church. We need a connection right at the top, but also a recognition that these young people are the soldiers of the cross. They are the ones who will drive the needs of this church. We must recognize
Let me
them.
give you a story, Professor. Yeah, hata Yesu si alikuwa anapenda tu story. There was a time a church in along Jogoo Road. I don't want to mention it for my own security. But this church used to borrow seats from a nearby church, a Sunday church. And every time they had a camp meeting or a big congregation, they went borrowed seats from that church they bring. Then after about 3 years of borrowing, one day the other church now had a need and they came to borrow. You know what they were told?
Church board, haijakaa.
Vitu vya kanisa ambao vimeombewa haviendangi nje. Ni moja. One day, after preaching to some of these pastors from these other churches, one reverend decided, this is the truth, and he decided to be baptized. So we baptized him, and then he went to his local church in somewhere in Rift Valley. After a short time, he realized that the church, our church, did not have the infrastructure was wanting. So he wanted to buy seats. So he called us and he said, please do this. We are like 60 members in this church. Mtununulie viti. So we changad funds, then we bought 60 seats, about 80 seats. Then we gave him, we called him in town, we gave him 60. He went to that church. After 2 months, one of his daughters was graduating. One of his daughters, the same guy, one of his daughters was graduating. So he went to his fellow elders. He has resigned as a reverend elsewhere. So
which was also a source of livelihood for him.
So now he has no money, he has no earning, nothing. Because of the truth. Then he came and told his fellow elders, Faze, I have a need. Kindly, my daughter is graduating and people are coming to this homestead. Nisaidie na viti. He was told, I know you know the answer. He was told,
You are dedicated.
Ile ameombewa. He doesn't leave this place. So the guy was desperate. Then 2 days later, 2 days to the event, his wife told him, why don't we go back to the church that we came from? Si twende tuombe huko. They went there. They were given seats, generator, PA system, tent. And not only that, they came. Those guys came and they erected. Then, during the event, people from our church came to eat. And they actually want to take over the program. So, the reason why we are saying there are people in our church who have no calling whatsoever.
You reminded me of an incident. As I mentioned, I ran a program called 1,000 Voices for Peace. And recently I invited a choir from Ghana. They reached out to me and told me we want to come to Kenya. And I said, come. And I hosted them, about 22 of them. And I was looking for our people to be able to welcome them to their congregation. So I went to one of our churches. They went there. I have been asked for about a month, who gave you permission to let them come to our church? To date, those elders still want to understand, the Ghanaians, was there a service call? How did they come? Wow. A member, and I will mention the church of St. Stephen's Jogo Road, went to the provost and told them that this guy has a choir from Ghana. Can you open the doors? The provost gave us the church. The provost organized dinner for these guests, made dinner for them, and they ate, and it was an amazing fellowship. The following Sunday, the provost, All Saints Cathedral, I went to him and I told him, I have visitors. Could you let us use your main auditorium? He gave us the church publicity system. That is a PA person right to the entire church. This is an instruction from me as a provost. And he gave us the hall, he gave us the PA system. They made it available. And what I have learned is people have been asking, actually they've told me that, Achia, you're promoting ecumenism. That is problematic. We don't do ecumenism. I'm not doing ecumenism. They will know we are Christians by our love. I'm a musician. I'm actually quoting a song. They will know. And this is a thing that is lacking. It is not how much spirit of prophecy you quote. It is not that you stopped eating meat and you drink soya. It is your love.
There are things
that will prove.
There are things you haven't mentioned.
Okay, I will not go.
Brown chapati. You should be careful. You know? There are those that come with salvation.
You know? But what I learned is we have other sheep out there. They may not be part of this fold, but they are living according to the ways of Christ. And at the right time, they will be coming in as our people who are very legalistic are walking out.
True.
And we need to be very careful as a people.
Very true. And that has happened a lot because every time you bring people to church, people have rules for them.
Right.
There was a time we preached in a certain church, not a church as in a crusade, an open air. Yeah. Then a lady came from a very vibrant Sunday church, let me just say it like that. Yeah. And those people are very... they are on fire.
On fire for Jesus.
So after she came to church, they told us that they are not going to baptize people immediately because these people have to go through class. Then this girl, hakufa moyo, she had seen the truth and it had set her free. So she said, don't worry, Pastor, they will baptize me at some point. But the problem was, 3 Sabbaths later, she realized nobody's welcoming people at the door.
Right. She started welcoming people.
Unfortunately, she was seen by the OCS of the church.
This is the OCS.
Bibi ya elder mwenye amekuwa hapo miaka 22 na miezi 4. She has been there since the beginning of this church.
Hao ndio waanzilishi. Pillar.
The husband has been an elder all along. Mkimtoa anaacha hii kanisa. So lazima tuchunge mzee asiache kanisa. So this lady told she went and met the new girl and asked her, who are you? She akasongesha kando, akongeleshange hapo, akasongesha kando kidogo, akaulizwa, wewe ni nani? I'm so and so. Who gave you this work? Are you baptized? No, I'm still waiting for baptism. She's happy making this announcement, not knowing that she's informing the wrong person. So they all say, sir, and who gave you this work? I know I saw nobody's welcoming people in this church. I decided, kaulizwa, no, kwa kanisa yangu
kuna protocol.
Hakufanyi yangu. Bibi ya mzee number 1. Archbishop. She was told to sit down, and she was told, and many times I see you every time a sermon is on, unainua mkono at preach to me.
Sio hapa. Sio hapa.
Hiyo tabia usikuja nayo hapa. So this girl found a place and sat. But the problem is, the OCS found a place so that they could have it. So every time this girl anasikia sermon imeiva, she wants to raise up, kata hivi macho, anaona OCS amemka macho. The OCS is careful about this thing. So the lady anapoa. Second Sabbath, she chose to go sit near the choir. OCS came, looked for her, akakaa mahali penye wanaonana. The third Sabbath, akaamua kukaa mbele. OCS akakaa hapa. This lady, in the middle of the sermon, she rose up, took her bag, and went back to the church she came from. So there are people in church who have never met Christ. They inherited the church. They do not know about salvation. So to me, there are people who haven't gotten this message to date. They still think salvation is by works. And that's where we have a disconnect. So this church must go back to the roots and find out the Christ's way. Then we will actually set off.
How does that happen? Because now if the majority or those who are most vocal are the ones who, in your own words, have not met Christ, and they're the ones in positions of power, influence, and everything that there is.
Yeah, that's a really loaded question. And for me, I think it is the young men. When the Seventh-day Adventist Church was formed, how old do you think E.G. White was?
17 or
17.
Yes.
How old was James White? He was 20. So these were very, very young people. But what the difference between that generation, and I'm always asking these questions, where can we get back that Adventism of the early 1844s? That Adventism was founded on Bible study. That Adventism was founded on seeing needs in society and meeting those needs. It was Bible study, prayer, and basically evangelistic activity. We cannot go back there. Somebody calls these things the oracles of God. There is prayer. There is study of God's word, and there's mission. If we are to meet those dictates, we must go back there. And it starts with the young people. It won't start with the older generation. And the reason is, many of us, we have the cares of this world. In my time, I'm retiring in a few years. And so we have a lot of cares. And so many of my generation, I was telling somebody earlier, we actually stifle some of those evangelistic initiatives because we don't want the church to move too fast. The young people must rise and live out their creed. I know in my church, Nairobi Central Church, we have a youth that are on fire for their God. They study the word. And in fact, COVID was a blessing in disguise because suddenly we started broadcasting our programs. And so it is the young people who run, because some of these technology, people my age, we can't run them. We are challenged. So the young people must start taking initiatives. We cannot wait for the older people to do this. It is the young people to rally and push the older people to follow. It's a challenge I would like to pose to the younger generation.
I actually concur with his sentiments because young people should be given positions of leadership. Young people should be useful. It is only this church that sees young people as young. Al-Shabaab does not see a young person as young. Koni huyo wa huko nini northern Uganda. Resource ni watoto kiasi. And that boy anapiga bunduki paka unashangaa. So you can imagine all these guys do not see these children as young. When Joshua, how was is it Joshua or Josiah? Yeah. He was king at 80 years old. So what does that mean? It is God who enables this person to be a leader. It's not about your gray hair. No, it's not about it. We can actually give an unmarried person to be a first elder. Right.
And you'll see a difference.
Yeah, you see a difference because if this person is faithful to God, why not?
should be the number one qualification.
And by the way, I agree with you in the sense that you cannot change. You cannot change by sticking within the box. You must start thinking outside the box to create any meaningful change. Our church is a bit stagnant. And I think the reason is there's a lot of within the box thinking. I'll give you, I happen to have been educated at the University of Nairobi, and we're very proud. UON, the university.
Yes.
So, University of Nairobi, we have been so inward thinking, within the box, not realizing that these other universities that have employed very young professors are quickly overtaking them and moving on. I work very closely with Jomo Kenyatta University. Many of their professors are young men, and they're thinking of networks. The older folk at UON are not looking at the potential networks, they're saying we are the best. And so I've seen it with Strathmore. I also teach for Strathmore, and I see the difference when the young people are given opportunities to serve and to work. That university has become world class.
True.
And so as a church, and all the churches that are thinking of becoming progressive, you cannot leave the young people out of the dynamic.
True.
They must be part of the dynamic.
Gentlemen, I think there's so much. This was perhaps scratching on the surface to begin a conversation that was timely and is also not limited by time, because this is something that we need to keep engaging each other around. And I think in our next conversation, we need to bring in now the youngsters to also inform the dynamics around this conversation so that as we speak and imagine that this is the direction that they are thinking about, they indeed can be able to...
And ladies.
And ladies, of course.
I agree that there's a gender imbalance here, so constitutionally we are improperly constituted.
We've just taken a lead to begin something that, of course, will outgrow all of us. Sure. But I just want to really, really appreciate the time that you have created to actually be part of this conversation. Let me allow each one of you perhaps to give your parting shot, especially in light of the subject that has made this conversation possible, where we have seen our young people really coming up strongly, taking a position, and making sure that they are heard. Let me allow you to perhaps give your final thoughts.
I will wish to say this, that in respect of our church, we need to also look at what is happening. We need to be aware of the paradigm shift in the society and see how we can align ourselves so that our evangelism also makes sense to the populace. We need a society that is heaven-bound. We need to think, as Professor says, without the box. We need to acknowledge and accept and appreciate the fact that our children have grown, and they may have better ways than we have, or better ways than what we have been practicing all along. It has been boring to them. So how do we then change this narrative so that our youths can also take up positions of leadership and lead this church to Canaan?
My favorite writer writes to the young people, and I'm going to quote so that I don't miss the words. She says, "Dear youth, what is the aim and purpose of your life? Are you ambitious for education, that you may have a name and a position in the world?" And then she says, "Have you thoughts that you dare not express, that you may one day stand on summits of intellectual greatness?" And then she says, "That you may sit in deliberative and legislative councils and enact the laws of the nation." And then she says, "There is nothing wrong with these aspirations." I'm just citing this because the impression is that when our youth engage in the discourse of the nation, that they have missed the mark. They have not. She speaks and says, there is nothing wrong. Every one of us can attain anything. I am a professor of statistics. I have been the president of the Statistical Association in Africa and in Kenya. I sit on the Global Council of Statistics in the world. And every young person should aim high, but when you get there, you make a difference. Yeah, so I just want to challenge the young people, even as we go through this maandamano season. Yeah.
Wow, gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been really a great conversation. But most importantly, we just want to really thank you for spending time to listen to this conversation. If you have anything perhaps you'd like us to consider in our next conversation, feel free to write to us. Let us know if there are things that we have said that have triggered you in a good or bad way. Kindly feel free. It's a free world. Write in the comments section. And of course, if you also want to be part of this conversation, next, write to us. You're most welcome. So thank you so much. This has been our conversation here on Shared Moments with Justus. I hope to see you once again. And thank you to my guests.
Thank you.
Asanteni sana.
Asante.
I'll call you again.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Asante sana.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you.